Welcome. My name is Kirsten Murphy, and I'm the Executive Director for the Vermont Developmental Disabilities Council. This is the beginning of our presentation in 6 parts of performance years 1 and 2 and the work plans that describe how the DD Council will meet its goals and objectives. We begin a new 5-year cycle on October 1st of 2021. And that will last all the way through September of 2026. And we are expected as a funding recipient from the Administration on Community Living to have detailed work plans that will be filed at the end of this coming September. So the most accessible way, I think, for people to follow the details of these plans is for me to describe them using supporting slides. We do have a very detailed document that you're welcome to also inspect on our website that has schematics and very detailed information about each of our 14 objectives. However, I think the PowerPoint and my talking through it is a little more digestible. So without further ado, and with much appreciation for your attention, I'm going to begin sharing my slides. This will be the introductory first section. And for those of you that are following the deck, this will be the first 9 slides, I believe, of the deck. All right, so by way of introduction, work plans are living documents that can change over time, and in fact, are expected to change over time. So you should think of this as our best guess as to what we will be doing in the next 2 years in order to implement our plan, which the goal of which is ultimately to improve the lives of Vermonters with developmental disabilities and their family members. In this first video, we are going to talk about the introductory material, how the work plan is structured, how the council sorted through all of its 14 objectives, and then what makes a good work plan. We will then have a video that is about empowering people. That's our first goal area with 5 objectives. We will have a video about gaps in services. That is 3 objectives. We will actually have a video about addressing the needs of an underserved group. That is only 2 objectives. Then we will have a video about our systems change work. And then we will have a very short 6th video, which is the conclusion of this series. It would be probably very challenging to watch all of these sequentially in one sitting, so I encourage you to pick and choose what you find what you find you have time for. These vary considerably in length. I would pay attention to the introduction first. It doesn't particularly matter what order the next 4 videos are watched in, and then the conclusion is best at the end. All right, so first off, who is the Administration for Community Living? ACL is a department or division under, it stands for the Administration for Community Living, and it's a division in the Federal Agency of Health and Human Services. So Health and Human Services has many, many branches: Centers for Disease Control, the Institute of Health. One of those branches is the Administration for Community Living. And in that section of the agency, a lot of work is done to support states in delivering home and community-based services, whether that's for seniors through the Older Americans Act, whether that's for people with disabilities, people with brain injury, whether it's people with physical disabilities through the independent living movement, or whether it's through people with developmental disabilities who are supported by 3 organizations that are all set out in the Federal DD Act, or the Bill of Rights and Assistance for People with Developmental Disabilities Act. which was last reauthorized in 2000. Those three organizations I will come back to in a minute. Now, when ACL thinks about the work of DD councils, it thinks of things as a kind of a formula. So this formula is going to drive how we have organized our work plan. There are certain inputs that are combined with a set of activities, which is the core of our work plan. And those result in outputs and outcomes. Now let me define each of those four terms. Inputs are the council's resources. So it could be our federal appropriation from Congress. We receive about $500,000 each year. It could be the council staff time, or it could in fact be just the connections that the council has built in the community and the connections it builds to state leaders. Activities are the things that the council does, whether that is something that council staff do or something that staff hire or arrange for another organization to do through a grant or contract. Those inputs and activities combined result in outputs, which are sometimes called deliverables. These are concrete things that are produced as a result of our activities. So those could be documents, public comment, it could be a white paper, it could be a new rule or law, it could be the fact that 25 people are trained in a certain thing, it could be a new program or a new approach to some sort of service. So those are examples of outputs, and then also outcomes. And they're related, but outcomes are a little bit different. Outcomes describe changes in the world around us. So for example, as a result of investing in alternatives to guardianship, an outcome would be that more Vermonters with developmental disabilities use supported decision-making arrangements, whether in combination with guardianship agreements or in a situation where one is one's own guardian. All right, so inputs plus activities result in outputs and outcomes. Now I'm going to show you a schematic, a diagram of what the slides for this presentation are going to look like. At the top, we will always identify the objective by its number and name, and then we will have the text of the objective. Objectives are sort of mini goals, smaller goals, not our big goals. Our objectives, there are 14, are organized under 4 big goals. There are 14 mini goals called objectives. And really the objectives are kind of the driver of our activities. Those objectives are still pretty abstract statements, pretty aspirational, pretty much something we hope to do, in something that we hope to have happen in the future as a result of our work. They're usually just a sentence, or in a couple cases, a couple sentences. So what puts meat on the bones of those objectives are the activities. And this is where council members have spent a lot of time, as have staff, thinking up the actual activities that make the most sense in order to breathe life into that objective. Now, remember that activities plus our resources are going to yield outcomes, changes in the world around us. So we list a series of activities, often kind of clustered in different bunches thematically. So themes with different activities. These activities will probably result in more than one outcome. There will be several outcomes. And then on the next page, because remember, we don't only have outcomes, but we have outputs, which are things. On the next slide, for each objective, we will list the outputs as well. Really, the core of the work plan is thinking about what are the activities we're going to do and what are the changes we're hoping to make. So this first slide in each objective. All right. So one other thing I want to mention is how we thought about using the time of our, sorry, I did not know that would do that. Using the time of our members well, given that there were 14 objectives, and that was quite a lot of things to work through. So we organized the 14 objectives into categories, or I describe them as buckets. You can see that little icon there. And these categories are projects that are already underway, projects that are new, and projects where we really need to do some more study. Okay. So the core of the work plan and where we took the most attention from our program committee was here in this new category. These things are color coded. You don't need to follow the color coding. It's not especially important to understanding the plan, but if you care to notice the difference between something we've started and something that's brand new or something we're studying, they are coded purple, pink, and yellow. So this category 2 new is where 7 or half of the objectives fell. And we asked our council members on the program committee to brainstorm what are the activities you want to undertake in the first few years. There were some projects related to 4 of our objectives that were already underway. So staff more or less crafted that part of the work plan. And then there are a few objectives, 3, that are so new to the council that we really need to step back and study them first before we're in a good place to decide what the best strategy will be for implementation. And this course notice kind of lets us stagger where we're at and helps us kind of introduce new things over time. So the first 2 years we'll work with these things. These 3 objectives are likely to turn into the pink category when we get down the line to years 3 and 4 and 5. All right, so that's the color coding and the different buckets we put things into. Then I do want to introduce to you a couple of terms that the administration for community living uses. It's not terribly important to follow these, but I want to make you aware of them. There are 7 areas of emphasis, and areas of emphasis together more or less describe the whole universe of services that someone might need to draw upon and supports. So these are employment, housing, transportation, health and healthcare, quality assurance, education and early intervention, which is education for very young children, and formal and informal supports. So one of the questions that the Administration for Community Living asks us is, are you covering, which areas are you covering at any given activity? And are you covering enough areas to be impactful? The other thing that the Administration for Community Living thinks about is the strategies we're using. And they want us to be pulling from a list of up to 11 strategies. You don't have to use all of them, but a strong work plan uses many of them. So these are things like reaching out to a new community and drawing them into some type of project outreach. Providing technical assistance, meaning we have some expertise, and so we share that with another organization to help them do their work better. It could be supporting and educating a community. Often this is public awareness about disability. It could be collaborating and coordinating with other agencies. It could be coordinating with our DD network partners or with other programs across the state. It could be eliminating a barrier to service. It could be designing or redesigning a whole system. Or it could be building a coalition and drawing more citizens into participating in the policymaking process. Another strategy is informing policymakers, going to the legislature and telling legislators about what it's like to live with a developmental disability and what people need in order to live meaningful, full lives when they're in that particular situation. It could mean informing policymakers at the state agencies too. It doesn't have to just be legislators. Another strategy is demonstrating a new approach. So often we invest a small amount of money in a small project that lets us try out a new approach. And if that looks really viable, we replicate it, we scale it up a bit, and then we try to have the organization that most logically ought to own that approach in an ongoing way. We hope that they'll take responsibility and take it over if it's proved itself to be valuable. These are all different types of strategies. And then there's an other category. So I have not thought what those would be yet, but no doubt there are probably some other things that we will do as well as strategies. Because I skipped it, I want to go back to this previous slide to say one more thing. Remember how we have these categories for our objectives. No objective, none of them, fit nicely into just one category. In most cases, we're engaging in some activities that are new, but we're also doing some study, or we're engaging in a project that's already underway, but we're going to add something new. So raising awareness is a good example of a project where we are going to do some new things and some things that we are continuing and carrying over from our last cycle. Universal design is a great example where we really need to study that in the primary areas that we've identified as areas of emphasis, healthcare and recreation. But at the same time, we do have a project already underway that also has to do with making a certain type of procedure, medical procedure, more accessible. So I have assigned objectives to the category where most of the activities lie. But in many cases, you'll see that there are multiple categories covered. All right, so now we will close up this introduction by just saying a little bit about what makes a good work plan. And this has really just been based on, well, years of experience of looking at these things both here at this council, at other councils. I often read work plans and as a reader for the Administration for Community Living, so that I'm familiar with how other councils are going about things. So here's what I look for in a good work plan. It uses many different strategies. The council in question doesn't get stuck on one strategy. It doesn't just focus on, say, informing policymakers. It pulls from a whole bag of tricks. It covers many areas of emphasis, and some of those, as much as resources permit, are done in great depth, and some are perhaps maybe a little lighter touch. There are activities in the 5-year plan that support 2 or more objectives, because we're always trying to get more bang for our buck, if you will. So if a project and its activities can support more than one objective, all the better. Our plan must meet 4 DD Act requirements. Specifically, it must support self-advocacy. It must support peers who are self-advocates, teaching other self-advocates. It must address the needs of an under or unserved community. You'll see that in our goal area 3. And then it must have some activities that are undertaken in partnership with the other DD network partners, the other partners that are named in the DD Act. I said that I would be coming back to who those are. I didn't want to have to say it more than once. That is Disability Rights Vermont, which is our legal branch. And it is the Center for Disability and Community Inclusion at the University of Vermont, which is a research and teaching organization. And then us, the DD Council, is the 3rd part of what they sometimes call the 3 sisters. Not my favorite metaphor. I prefer being being here in Vermont, to think of it as a three-legged milking stool, which you know is strong because there are three sturdy legs to hold it up. But if any one was taken out, the stool would tip over. So those three organizations make for a good, strong approach to the constant improvement of services for people who experience a developmental disability and their families. Good work plans set realistic goals or targets. They don't they don't promise to do something that's way beyond the capacity of a council, especially a relatively small council like ours. I say small in that we have a staff of 3, not I don't know, 12 like in Texas. And then finally, the work plan. This is very important. Balances the need to have some objectives and activities that are very innovative and work on things that are wholly new and might bring about a really interesting way of solving a problem that we haven't been able to solve for a long time. Balancing that innovation with a sustained investment in long-term systems change. Really, councils engage in changing systems, and that takes time. 5 years is not nearly enough time to fully change a system. So we sustain some of our investments and certainly our advocacy in issues over well more than 5 years. We have, for example, been advocating for some changes around case management since they were first announced by the federal Medicaid program, and that was 7 years ago. So not just the last 5-year cycle, but the one before it. And you'll see we continue to do that in this 5-year cycle. It's probably going to be this 5-year cycle where we're finally successful. At least I hope so. You'll also see that we sustain investments in programs like our leadership series, because it's important that we not just drop things, but that we build up a critical mass in, for example, in leadership, a critical mass of graduates. By the end of the next 2 years, we will have 200 graduates from that program. So that's 200 Vermonters who are family members or self-advocates who at least have a shared basic understanding about what leadership looks like and about how to advocate in the decision-making venues here in Vermont. So again, that balance of innovation with long-term investment, that's what makes a good work plan. And with that, I will conclude this introductory part of the presentation. I encourage you to watch the next 4 videos as you have time, and then to take a look at the very brief concluding video. Thank you very much for your attention, and have a good day.